Hello and welcome. My name is Jonathan Malin and this is Tim Cottrell. And we are glad to have you today. We're excited to talk through some of the barriers that we see as we hire globally and how IsoTalent can help solve those solutions. Tim, why don't you give just a little bit of background on yourself and I'll introduce myself before we jump in.
Sure. So I've lived 23 of the last 24 years in Latin America, 20 years in Mexico, 3 years in Chile. I've been the senior vice president of tax at a Mexico based publicly traded company called Cemex, and I've done business all over the globe. $30 billion of M&A and deals virtually all over the world. And I've been related to tax issues my whole career.
Plenty of fun stories to tell as you've traveled the globe, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Awesome. I've lived a much more boring life. I've been involved in HR for almost the last 20 years, and teams spread across the globe. My last company, we had about 40% of our employees international, and so dealt with it from the HR side. So between Tim and I, from the tax, from the HR and finance side, we want to talk about some of the things that IsoTalent's doing to help expand the global reach that you have as opportunities as you build your teams out. So. One thing, why don't we just jump in a little bit and we'll talk through this presentation as I share this. But it's kind of funny, Tim. We talk about as you start to expand globally, you can solve one problem by finding good talent. But then how many other problems do we create by saying, all right, I now employ someone globally?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, how do you get technology to that person? How do you reimburse their expenses? What do you do with value added tax? If they need to go to an office or be involved in a video conference and their home doesn't accommodate that, where do they go? How do they do that?
Yeah.
There's just so many issues that pop up, and some of them are long term and some of them are short term, but just a lot of issues that come up when you hire somebody internationally.
Yeah. There are plenty. Sorry, I jumped forward on my slide deck here, but there are tons of issues that happen as you expand your search, and the small pieces of them being logistics, large pieces of them being taxes and nexus and everything in between. So we're going to talk through those, but first we're going to talk with layoffs. Layoffs is the big conversation right now. If we look at this slide back in April of 2020, as COVID was hitting, there were large amounts of layoffs happening. If we look back over the last couple of months, November of 2022 specifically, double the amount of layoffs were happening in the tech sector than were happening when COVID was hitting, which is a
That's
crazy
incredible.
amount. It's an incredible amount. And to all those who have been laid off, obviously we want to help and see if we can find you the right job as we expand, for all of our clients. But the reason I bring this up is twofold. Number one, chief economist out of ZipRecruiter recently said that while there are a lot of layoffs happening, this talent pool that's being laid off is usually a skilled workforce and is finding jobs remarkably fast, is bouncing back and bouncing into a new job, which tells us there are still a lot of jobs available.
Well, we hear about the layoffs, but we also hear each month the economy is adding numbers of jobs, and so they're being absorbed immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, we still see a 3.6% unemployment rate nationwide. Do you happen to know what the unemployment rate is in a state like Utah?
Utah just last week or two ago, I can't remember exactly, they announced a 2.2% unemployment rate, which again, that's crazy numbers.
And I've heard anecdotally that in certain sectors, like in the accounting sector,
Mm-hmm.
the rate is just over 1%. I mean, literally anybody that has anything to do with accounting and is looking for a job can find a job.
Yeah.
But there's no talent available.
Yeah. And that is the biggest problem. 4.5% is typically referred to as full employment, right? Everybody that is qualified and is looking for jobs has found a job. 3.5% is U.S. rate right now. 2.2% is Utah's rate, which is one of the leaders of the nation on unemployment. And why is that so important? As we take a look at this next graph, notice here in 2017, the red is the number of unemployed people, blue is the number of job openings. And in 2017, we saw this switch. We saw this happen where baby boomers started to exit the workforce and more jobs and a hot economy started to come online. And the amount of people to fill these jobs just didn't keep up.
Well, baby boomers started retiring. People had long COVID symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Other people, families just decided to change up the way that their family was involved in the workforce.
Yeah.
And one or sometimes both parents decided to stay home. All kinds of things happened, but people left the workforce like we've never seen it before. And that happened right as the economy was rebounding.
Yeah. And you mentioned COVID. Obviously, we see a blip in the radar here as those recession or as those layoffs happened going into COVID. But then moving forward to 2022, see the job openings again. We have a hustling economy in the US, and there's been a lot of job growth, a lot of the companies growing, which is very good. But with that, the number of job openings has surged and the number of people in the workforce has dropped, right? To what you mentioned, whether it's long COVID, baby boomers, people leaving the workforce. We have fewer people in the workforce than we've had in 30 some odd years and more job openings than perhaps we've ever had.
So right now we have 2 job openings virtually for every person that's looking for a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So
That's
how do you
crazy.
fill that gap as a company? How do you continue to grow and look for opportunities? Or, in this scenario, Tim, as a CEO, how do you drive results?
Right. So, I mean, the CEO is thinking about a recession coming or contemplating one and is saying, ship the newest version of our product. The CFO might come into the CTO's office right after the CEO leaves and say, you got to cut back on expenses. The chief revenue officer is saying, we still need to hit our sales goals.
Yeah.
So, what's a company to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of misfiring messages or different messages coming in where
Messages that cross each other, right?
Yeah. And right now that CFO holds a lot of power in an organization because they're the one keeping the ship afloat, right? Watching finances as a recession might be coming. One alternative that's been kind of interesting that we've helped a lot of customers with is offshoring or nearshoring talent, right? Let's take a look at Latin America here for a second. We've gone out and we've looked at job salary data for a 15-year veteran engineer, senior level engineer, not quite an architect, but really solid engineer. Here in Utah, you're probably right around 200,000, 210 for a salary. New York, slightly more expensive.
Yeah. Cheaper than the Bay Area, cheaper than New York.
Yeah, but the Bay Area gets crazy, right? Those are big numbers, almost 300,000 for that engineer. But if you cross the border and you look for other engineers in Mexico, the same quality, same type of engineer, your salary is probably about 85,000. Colombia, a little bit lower. Argentina, even lower.
Well, and between Argentina and we don't like to do a lot in Venezuela just because it's a hard place, but we do have a couple of opportunities there and a couple of employees there. But Argentina and Venezuela, with the hyperinflation that they're having, you can pretty much name your terms and find people that are very qualified. Especially in Argentina, they have a strong history of producing top-notch people, great educational system, and we've been able to find a lot of talent in Argentina. And the inflation, if you're paying in local pesos, it just gets cheaper every month.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We highlight specifically here the economic arbitrage, right? The opportunity to pick up talent for a little bit cheaper than what we're used to here. But let's highlight a couple of other positives as we move forward. Actually, before we do that, let's talk about, all right, we have this talent. We see this talent down in Latin America specifically, or across the globe. Historically, how have you handled that from a finance or tax perspective? Why don't you talk through that?
So, 20 years ago when India first started offering their services for programming and outsourcing, the option was to outsource. Following that, if a larger company wanted to create a presence, they would form an entity and hire people into that entity. And I've seen this more. I don't know what your experience has been, but I've seen more in the in COVID and then coming out of COVID, companies finding talent and hiring them as contractors.
Yeah.
Even companies like Google. I mean, if we were to look at the real number of people that they've laid off, plus the contractors that they were paying as contractors outside the U.S. as they stopped using some of them, I'll bet the number's a lot higher. But that was a very popular and probably continues to be a non-compliant but popular way of accessing international talent. So, outsourcing to India, just letting somebody else provide a team for you,
Yeah.
that you have less power over or more power to dictate how and when they do their work. Forming your own entity, which is just using your own people and hiring your own people into that entity, and then just finding one person here, one person there, and contracting them as independent contractors.
Yeah, and historically, there's been some pretty big pain points. We touched on outsourcing and the problems that we have there, whether it be time zone or whether it be communication. Contractors, there's legality issues. Entities, there's just a lift issue. It's expensive. It takes a lot of people to manage, and unless there's a real reason, sales or expansion or things like that, entity is usually not the answer as you expand globally.
It really is. It really is a tough one, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. But KPMG, the large tax
Firm.
and accounting firm, a couple of years ago, they came and knocked on my door when I was at Cemex, and they tried to sell a service of helping us to clean up our org chart. Fortunately, our org chart was pretty clean. We worked on it constantly, but their numbers showed that by having an entity, between compliance costs, extra employees that were hired just to address the needs of that entity,
Mm-hmm.
that it would cost anywhere between $200,000 and $500,000 a year, one entity,
Jeez.
depending on the country, depending on a lot of other factors. But their low end number was $250,000 to have an entity.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's talk about a case study recently with a client that we helped. We were able to work with them and walked in. They have an entity in India where they have over 100 engineers and are doing things, mostly right there. That's doing things right, building it out right. But then they also wanted to build some teams over in Latin America, and they'd started to hire contractors throughout LATAM. So Colombia, Mexico, Costa Rica, without a real strategy, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fun because we were able to come in and help to show not only here's how you can expand throughout LATAM, finding the right talent, employing them the right way, but also let's kind of clean up some of the mess, right? Let's make sure that growth can continue to happen. And we were able to introduce them to our EOR solution, employer of record, and help expand even further than what they've done in the past.
Well, one of the things that we haven't talked about yet when we talked about the contractor way of accessing international talent is, if you're going to use that contractor for more than 2 months,
Yeah.
3 months at the very most under rare circumstances, you shouldn't be accessing them as an independent contractor.
Yeah.
There are so many things that could go wrong. And after 2 months, 3 months at the most, that person in no country in Latin America that I'm aware of,
Yeah.
continues to be seen by local authorities as an independent contractor. So, you may not have problems today, but what happens when you try to get rid of that person because your operation all of a sudden contracts?
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about some of the issues that come up when you try to do that. If they're an employee, they're entitled to a separation bonus, severance.
Yeah.
They also, if they should have been treated as an employee and weren't, they can go to the Labor Relations Board and file a grievance. And there is no short supply of attorneys that are willing to help them file a lawsuit to try to collect the severance that they should have gotten. And so as a company, you really are taking on some risk when you hire somebody for more than 2 months as a contractor.
Yeah, I know in the HR space, employing people as contractors in the U.S. is always this, like it's a red flag. We got to be super, super careful or just not do it. It's very similar throughout Latin America. Very similar.
A lot of companies, like we're seeing in this example, they think, well, I really don't have enough employees that this is a problem.
Yeah.
I think I can fly under the radar, which is maybe true, maybe,
yeah,
until they don't need those people anymore, or until something changes in their business and they have to make decisions about those people, or even just accidentally it comes up and gets discovered.
Yeah.
And if those people, I mean, the test is never, well, I don't have enough critical mass.
Yeah.
It's like a non-US person coming to work in the US and starting to collect the salary while they live in the US. They're immediately subject to Social Security.
Yeah.
Whether that's one person or 100 people. It's the same way in Latin America. After 2 months, they should be treated as an employee.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about Latin America and these examples that we've given, but there's benefits no matter where in the world you're working with people. Right now, DE&I is a big deal, right? How do we find diversity, especially here in Utah, where we're talking about equity for all and inclusion of all groups? This is a really fun opportunity to reach out across the world. One of my past companies, we had employees in Canada, we had employees in the Philippines, we had employees in Mexico. And that opportunity for us to learn about different cultures, to understand the way that they looked at problems differently, it helped us as an organization. It helped us grow and see people are different. We have different experiences, but those are opportunities to learn that made us as a company that much better.
Exactly. Let's take a look at another example of things that we've seen some of our clients do. So we had one client that hired 2 engineers as a proof of concept in Mexico. They ended up having 6 engineers throughout Latin America in development, in Node.js, and manual Q&A. It took them 5 weeks to hire, from source to hiring.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that company, Jonathan. What did you think that was amazing about that?
It was a lot of fun because not only, they tried out that proof of concept and it worked great for them. They wanted to go expand, but they wanted to expand just more than engineers, right? Let's go figure out some DevOps. Could we run DevOps remotely? What about some manual QA testers? Our team here at IsoTalent was able to go from, job descriptions and sourcing all the way through hiring and onboarding in as little as 5 weeks. And the crazy part about it was 6 employees, 5 different countries, $270,000 of salary for an average recruiting cost of just over $8,000 each. Like the savings of 6 people hired for $270,000 in your development team is unheard of.
So the economic arbitrage is important.
It's crazy.
They're fully compliant
Yep.
in a lot of different countries.
Yep.
And they got the best talent. They didn't restrict themselves by the borders.
Yeah, that was their approach. They said, let's utilize your recruiting function to go out and find the best talent wherever it is. We don't care where it is. The location doesn't matter to us because we know that the EOR works. We can stay compliant, and then we can utilize that best talent. So if our DevOps engineer is sitting in Brazil, that's okay because we know that they'll get the work done.
Exactly.
It was a super fun case study. There's one other that kind of highlights a little bit more about this. A different client started out with a similar proof of concept and scaled that team up to just over 20 engineers now. They're just over 22 now over the last 3 years. They also have a team in the Philippines. They were expanding at the same time, building out a customer success team. So different groups, different skill sets, different countries, but different opportunities, right? So 30 some odd people international for this company. Quality of candidates continue to be high. Turnover is almost non-existent, which is something that we haven't highlighted yet, but we need to talk about. And then the funnest part for me is now they come to us and say, hey, we received another referral that we want to hire because the team around them want to bring in high quality individuals to work with. The recruiting costs have gone down because these referrals keep coming in and the opportunity to expand keeps growing.
It's a great solution.
So we've talked about EOR. We've mentioned EOR. Let's expand on it a little bit. What is employer of record, and how is that an opportunity to expand without some of these pitfalls that we've talked about?
So if we look at this continuum that we were looking at in a previous slide, you start out with outsourcing, then maybe a contractor, and all the way on the other extreme to an entity. An EOR fits, probably between a contractor and an entity, although it could fit in a lot of different places on this continuum, but most easily right where you see it. And instead of having just the real ease of using a contractor, you have a little bit more. You have to go through the process of contracting them with a contract. Yeah. Sometimes those contracts have to be sent to the national hiring authorities, the national labor people. Sometimes the candidates have to get a physical before they can start working. So there are some formalities, but nothing like an entity. There's not a statutory audit every year. There are no corporate tax returns to be filed. we put those employees of yours into our entities, and they begin to work as soon as that happens, which is usually a 1 or 2 day onboarding process after they've been identified, interviewed, and you've made the decision to move forward with them.
Yeah. The benefits of an EOR is it allows you as a company to expand internationally by utilizing somebody else's entity, right? In this case, IsoTalent. IsoTalent has done the background and moved forward on building a lot of these entities or relationships. And now we're able to house these employees for you. We make sure that a compliant payroll moves forward. We make sure that all the taxes get paid in a compliant and on-time way so that tax authorities aren't coming after your company. Anything from benefits to timesheets to statutory minimums to a termination. In every country, termination's different. An at-will employment relationship like we have in the US is actually fairly rare as you get across the borders, right? In Latin America, a lot of times there's a mandatory severance unless you're terminating for cause. And that's our job as an EOR to take care of all of that. My job growing in my profession over the last 20 years has been US HR. Now, as we've built this EOR, it's now international HR. And our job is to make sure that everything from onboarding all the way through termination, if it comes to that, is taken care of in a compliant way for you while allowing you to have access to employees wherever you want across the globe.
Exactly. And this is a lot more than just having a computer interface,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
I mean, there are real people that are answering the phone, that are helping resolve questions and problems. It's really like you're dealing with your team if everybody were in the same office.
Yeah.
In a lot of respects.
Yeah, and we've explained it kind of as a service, Tim. Let me show just a snapshot into our platform here. For HR folks, think of this as an international HRIS. For other people, think of this as a database, a one-stop solution to see everything going on with your international team. So here you see a small snapshot on the right. Here's the team that's onboarding. On the left, here's pending requests that you see that you need to approve as a manager, whether it be a PTO payment or an expense report or things like that, so that it's as automated as possible, it's electronic as possible, and we move out of the dark ages of managing employees via Excel, move it international employment to, hey, there's a platform that you can utilize, keeping track of the employees and the ability to scale this the right way and give your whole team the functionality they're looking for.
Well, and I think this really makes them feel like they're a part of the company. They're not just out in the hinterland, forgotten by the main office.
Yeah,
they're there. They're on the HR people's screen every day.
Yeah.
You can process payroll with one click, but as this continues to unfold, this tool, we're adding different things that allow you to recognize your employees, to send them things that make them feel included. It's really a robust solution.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away the personal aspect of having these employees on your team. You mentioned turnover. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Because I love an example that we have right here in our own offices, where a sister company of ours has 20 people, engineers that they've hired in Mexico. And in the 4 years that they've had those engineers, they've had one person that's left. And so let's see, 1 out of 20, that's 5%. But in 4 years, that's just over 1%.
Yeah. Yeah. The turnover is crazy. And what we found internationally, we have a really, really hot market for jobs, especially here in Utah, we talked about. And you've got recruiters that are reaching out constantly. You've got pressure for internal or external to find that next job. You don't see that as much internationally, and especially with US jobs. Right? If I have the opportunity from Brazil or the Philippines or insert European country here to work for a stable, growing, consistent US company, a lot of times they want to do that.
They want that experience. They like the opportunity to speak English a lot more.
Yep.
They like the structure, the meetings, the ability to participate. It's a lot different working in a US company than it is in a Latin company.
Yeah. I'll say we, U.S. companies, tend to value our employees a lot differently than worldwide.
That's true.
And so that turnover is a lot lower. And so any way that we can figure out how to incorporate them into the company, we do that. You're built into the platform. We talked earlier about, you hire someone and you find 7 different problems. And here we address a lot of those problems, whether it be culturally speaking, indoctrinating them into your company culture, swag, equipment, etc. Like, we'll help you with all of that. We manage all of that. We see all of that, and that's all taken care of through the EOR solution with IsoTalent.
And we have boots on the ground in a lot of these countries that can personally fulfill these things. We don't have our own employees in every country in Latin America, but we do in a number of countries, and we can immediately take care of a lot of those needs.
It is, and it's exciting, especially as we continue to reach cross-border. So a little bit about IsoTalent and why IsoTalent is the right EOR solution for you. We take a unique approach to it. We take a people-centric, person or employee first approach, where we love to recruit the people for you. We love to help you do that, to go find the right person. If you already have people internationally, great, that's just fine. But if we can help you identify those people, we actually have 11 recruiters worldwide that can reach into different countries or areas and recruit the right talent for you.
Can I just give you one example of that?
Yeah.
So some of our large competitors, they have the mindset of, you as a company go find your best talent, hire them, or get to the point of hiring them, and then bring them into our solution.
Yeah.
And the fact that we recruit, and we're the only EOR of size that has that opportunity is really powerful.
Yeah.
I met one of our clients is a one-man CPA who we were talking to about how can he grow, and he said, if I can't charge rates high enough to my clients that I can bring on even a senior accountant, so somebody that's been on the job in an accounting firm for 4 or 5 years, I can't even bring somebody like that on and be able to charge them out at a rate that will allow me to pay their salary, let alone make any profit. And so we talked to him about hiring somebody in Colombia. Fortunately, the CPA in the US speaks a little bit of Spanish, and the CPA in Colombia speaks probably 60% English, but not 95% English.
Yeah.
And he's able to bill this Colombian CPA's time out at a rate that allows him to make a profit. The Colombian CPA is growing. He's learning more Spanish every day. He's learning how to fill out U.S. tax forms. The the generally accepted accounting practices and policies are very similar between Colombia and the U.S. Close enough for an accountant that they can pick up quickly on the differences. So it's going to make all the difference for the growth trajectory of this one-man CPA shop. So the fact that we can help our clients find these people that can make a difference in their business and help them grow, to me, is very exciting.
It's a game changer. It's a game changer in a lot of ways. And that's why we pride ourselves at IsoTalent. We talk about we can find talent, whether it's down the street or across the globe. That's important. As we kind of highlighted right at the beginning, there's a labor problem. There's a labor shortage. And so no matter what we're seeing right now, where there's layoffs, et cetera, it still hasn't made a big enough dent to right size that, right? And so we know we're lacking in engineers. We're lacking in accountants. We're lacking in nurses. That gets talked about a lot. And so being creative and looking at different solutions to identify where can I go find the talent to continue to grow my business, it has to happen. Here in 2023, it's just a matter of, I can't keep up anymore. What's a different solution?
Well, and when we've talked to companies, Jonathan, about the EOR, and they've said no, which is every time less and less is the case. But when they say no, their strategy is to be able to find the people that they need in their local labor market. But all their competitors have the exact same strategy, and they're going to hire the people that they're going to replace or fill their needs from your company. And so the numbers just don't show that there's a solution based strictly in the US that allows that to happen.
Absolutely.
So you have the arbitrage, you have the labor pool, you have the diversity of experience that you get from hiring internationally. You have an eager workforce that gives you low turnover. I mean, I just like this from so many different perspectives.
Yeah, it's an awesome opportunity, and the ability to reach and solve a lot of these problems that we're seeing day to day can happen as you look at that international talent. So I know our team's standing by to help, and we'd love to talk to each of you as you have questions and opportunities. There's a link here, a QR code that you can reach out, schedule a time with our team, and we can talk through each of your situations and see if we can help, whether it be growing your team and identifying the right talent, helping maybe make it a little bit more compliant than you have with contractors or other opportunities, or even talk through some of the opportunities for growth and what we've seen. We'd love to do it and happy to help.
Well, and we talk about the thing that we love the most is to help you plan your next team. And that always turns into a conversation of, would you help me plan my last team? Because a lot of the people that we hired have left and we've got to fill in some holes. So
Yeah.
I love those conversations.
It's a lot of fun. So with that, I know we're short on time. I appreciate you joining today. Hopefully something that Tim and I talked about was helpful. And we look forward to working with you here at IsoTalent. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.